My own son stood in my living room, smirking as he told me I was cut out of his mother's $160 million fortune. He thought he'd won. He thought he had me cornered. But he had no idea what the lawyer was about to hand him. A check for exactly $15. It wasn't always about private jets, offshore accounts, and corporate takeovers. When Caroline and I first met, we were splitting a $2 slice of pizza in a cramped studio apartment in Chicago. She was a brilliant coder with fire in her eyes, and I was a high school history teacher who thought the world of her. We built a life together. We had a beautiful baby boy, Liam. For the first 10 years of his life, we were a normal, happy family. But ambition is a funny thing. It starts as a spark to keep you warm, and if you aren't careful, it turns into a wildfire that burns down your entire house. Caroline founded a data analytics firm called Nexus Core. At first, it was a modest venture run out of our spare bedroom. Then, the contracts started rolling in. First a local bank, then a national retailer, and suddenly, she was rubbing elbows with Silicon Valley tech giants. As her company's valuation skyrocketed, so did the distance between us. She started missing family dinners. Then she missed Liam's Little League games. Finally, she started missing our anniversary. The wealth changed her. She stopped seeing me as her partner and started seeing me as an anchor, tying her to a middle-class life she desperately wanted to escape. We divorced when Liam was 12. It was surprisingly amicable at first. She kept the company and the newly purchased mansion. I kept my teaching job, my pension, and my dignity. We split custody, but as Caroline's net worth ballooned into the 9 figures, eventually selling Nexus Core for a staggering $160 million, her time with Liam became a chaotic blur of extravagant gifts to compensate for her absence. I tried to keep Liam grounded. At my house, he had chores. He had a curfew. We went camping in the state park, ate casseroles, and I tried to teach him the value of a hard-earned dollar. But how does a high school teacher compete with a mother who buys her teenager a brand new Porsche 911 for his 16th birthday? By the time Liam turned 20, he was unrecognizable. The sweet boy who used to help me build birdhouses in the garage had morphed into an arrogant, entitled nightmare. He dropped out of college because, in his words, only peasants need degrees when their trust fund has a comma. He spent his days partying in Ibiza, racking up astronomical credit card bills and treating service workers like dirt on his designer shoes. I tried to intervene. I pleaded with Caroline to cut him off, to let him face the real world, but Caroline was consumed by guilt for not being a present mother, so she enabled him. Then came the diagnosis, stage 4 pancreatic cancer. By the time they found it, it had spread to her liver. The doctors gave her 6 months. She fought like hell and made it to 8. In her final weeks, Caroline was moved to a private hospice suite that looked more like a 5-star hotel penthouse than a hospital room. Liam barely visited. He claimed it was too depressing and used her illness as an excuse to go on a month-long bender in Cabo San Lucas with his new fiancée, Chloe, a woman who looked at Liam the way a shark looks at a wounded seal. But I was there. Despite everything, Caroline was the mother of my child, and I had once loved her deeply. I sat by her bed, holding her frail hand, the smell of sterile bleach and lilies heavy in the air. On one of her last lucid days, the machines beeping rhythmically in the background, she looked at me with hollow, sunken eyes. "I ruined him, Arthur," she whispered, her voice raspy and thin. "We both did our best, Care," I said, trying to comfort her. "No," she weakly squeezed my hand. "I gave him the world, and it poisoned his soul. He's going to burn through everything. He's going to destroy himself, and it's my fault." A tear slipped down her pale cheek. I wiped it away. "I fixed it, Arthur," she suddenly said, a surprising intensity flaring in her eyes. "I had Richard rewrite the trust, everything. I had to save our boy from himself. Promise me you won't let him hate me." Before I could ask her what she meant, a nurse came in to administer her morphine, and Caroline drifted off to sleep. She slipped into a coma 2 days later and passed away quietly on a rainy Tuesday morning. I was heartbroken, not just for the loss of a woman I once knew, but for the cryptic, heavy burden she had just placed on my shoulders. I had no idea what she had done, but I knew Liam was going to tear the world apart when he found out. Caroline's funeral was a spectacle. It was less a celebration of her life and more a networking event for the elite. Corporate sharks in bespoke suits whispered about stock options near the casket, while Liam stood at the front, playing the part of the grieving heir. He wore a custom Tom Ford suit, a Rolex Submariner on his wrist, and didn't shed a single tear. Chloe clung to his arm, practically measuring the floral arrangements in dollar signs. I stood in the back, wearing my best charcoal suit, the one I'd bought off the rack at a department store 10 years ago. When Liam finally noticed me at the reception, he didn't offer a hug. He didn't seek comfort. He walked up, champagne flute in hand, and offered a tight, condescending smile. "Surprised you showed up, Dad. Figured you'd be too busy grading pop quizzes or whatever it is you do." "She was my wife once, Liam. I'm here to pay my respects." I kept my voice steady, though my chest tightened at his callousness. "Right. Well, she's gone." He took a sip. "And just so we're clear, things are going to change around here. I'm taking over the estate. So if you're thinking Mom left you some kind of parting gift or alimony bonus, you can forget it. You get nothing, old man. Don't embarrass yourself by begging." "I don't want her money, Liam," I said, looking into the eyes of a stranger. "I just wanted my son back." He scoffed, rolling his eyes. "Save the Hallmark speech. Just stay out of my way." 3 days later, I was grading papers at my modest kitchen table when my phone rang. It was Richard Harrison, Caroline's longtime estate lawyer and one of the most formidable legal minds in the city. "Arthur," Richard's deep, baritone voice echoed through the speaker. "We are reading Caroline's will tomorrow at 10 a.m. I need you in my office." "Richard, I don't think that's appropriate," I replied. "Liam has made it abundantly clear that I'm not welcome, and I don't want a penny of Caroline's estate." "Arthur," Richard interrupted, his tone shifting from professional to urgent. "You are named as a primary party in the final codicil. If you are not in this room tomorrow, the entire trust is frozen. You have to be here." Caroline was very specific. My stomach dropped as I remembered Caroline's final words in the hospice room. "I fixed it, Arthur." "I'll be there," I breathed. The next morning, I walked into the sprawling, glass-walled offices of Harrison, Sterling, and Associates in downtown Chicago. The conference room was intimidating, a massive, polished mahogany table surrounded by plush leather chairs with a panoramic view of Lake Michigan. Liam was already there, lounging in a chair at the head of the table. He had his feet propped up on the mahogany wood. Chloe was next to him, aggressively tapping on her iPhone. When I walked in, Liam's smug expression immediately morphed into a scowl. He slammed his feet down. "What the hell is he doing here?" Liam snapped at Richard, who was calmly organizing a thick stack of documents. "Your father was summoned, Liam. Just as you were," Richard said without looking up. "Summoned? For what? A consolation prize? A used Honda?" Liam sneered. He turned to me. "I told you to stay away, Dad. Mom left everything to me. I've already met with the real estate agents to list her Hampton's house. You're just wasting your time." "Sit down, Liam," Richard commanded, his voice cracking like a whip. It was the only time I'd ever heard the lawyer raise his voice. It worked. Liam shrank back a little, crossing his arms and huffing like a petulant child. I took a seat at the far end of the table, resting my hands on my lap to hide the fact that they were shaking. Richard cleared his throat, adjusted his reading glasses, and looked at the two of us. "We are here today to execute the last will and testament of Caroline Miller," Richard began, untying a ribbon on a thick linen envelope. "I will skip the standard legal preamble and get straight to the distribution of assets, as Caroline instructed." Liam leaned forward, rubbing his hands together. Chloe finally put her phone away. her eyes wide with anticipation. "To my former husband, Arthur," Richard read, his voice echoing in the quiet room. "I leave my profound apologies. You were the only man who ever truly loved me for me, and I traded our happiness for a bank account. I was a fool." I closed my eyes. The words felt like a physical blow to my chest. "Get on with the money part," Liam interrupted impatiently. "We know they had a bad divorce. Let's get to my trust." Richard shot Liam a look of pure, unadulterated ice. "Very well," Richard continued, pulling a specific single sheet of paper from the stack. "To my son, Liam, I leave the sum of $15. The room went dead silent. You could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning. Liam blinked. A nervous, breathy laugh escaped his lips. "Wait, what? 15 million? You mumbled." "Richard, speak up." "I did not mumble," Richard said flatly, sliding a crisp, printed check across the mahogany table. It stopped right in front of Liam. $15.00. Liam stared at the check, the color completely drained from his face. Chloe leaned over, reading the amount, and gasped loudly. "This is a joke." Liam slammed his hands on the table, standing up. "This is a sick, twisted joke. My mother was worth $160 million. Where is the rest of it?" Richard folded his hands over the documents. He didn't flinch. "The remainder of the estate, the liquid assets, the real estate portfolio, the remaining shares in Nexus Core, have been placed into an irrevocable blind trust," Richard stated calmly. "A trust controlled by who?" Liam screamed, his face flushing violently red. "Who gets the money?" Richard slowly turned his gaze toward me. "Your father," Richard said. "Arthur. You are the sole executor and primary beneficiary of the Caroline Miller estate. You inherit it all." For a full 10 seconds, nobody moved. The silence in the mahogany boardroom was absolute, save for the frantic, erratic breathing coming from my son. Liam's eyes darted from Richard to me, and then back to the $15 check resting innocently on the polished wood. "You?" Liam finally choked out, his voice cracking. He pointed a trembling, manicured finger at me. "The guy who clips grocery coupons? The guy who drives a 10-year-old Subaru? Mom left $160 million to a high school history teacher. She left it to the only person she trusted to protect it," Richard said, entirely unfazed by Liam's escalating hysteria. "And, more importantly, to protect you." "Protect me from what?" Liam shrieked, his face twisting into a mask of pure rage. "That money is mine. I'm her blood. I'm her son. He's just a bitter ex-husband who couldn't handle a successful woman." Before I could even formulate a response, the most incredible thing happened. Chloe, the fiancée who had been clinging to Liam like a designer barnacle, slowly stood up. She picked up her Chanel handbag and adjusted her silk blouse. "Chloe, babe, call my legal team," Liam ordered, pacing the room like a caged animal. "Call Gregory. We're going to sue this firm into the ground. We're going to drag his name through the mud." Chloe didn't reach for her phone. Instead, she looked at the $15 check, then looked at Liam with an expression of profound disgust. "I'm not calling anyone, Liam," she said, her voice dripping with ice. She reached to her left hand, slid the massive 3-carat diamond engagement ring off her finger, and dropped it onto the table. It landed with a heavy, metallic clink. Liam froze. "What are you doing?" "I signed up for a trust fund, Liam. Not a tragedy," Chloe said bluntly. "I have a lifestyle to maintain. You can't even afford our dinner reservations tonight. We're done." Without another word, she turned on her red-soled heels and walked out of the conference room. The heavy glass door swung shut behind her, sealing Liam's humiliation. Watching my son in that moment broke my heart. The arrogance evaporated, leaving behind a terrified, lost boy. But I knew that if I reached out to comfort him then, I would only be reinforcing the entitlement that got him here. That, too, too. That, too. This isn't over. Liam spat at me, tears of anger welling in his eyes. He snatched the check off the table and tore it into confetti, throwing the pieces in my face. I will ruin you. I will contest this will, and I will take every single penny. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled in its frame. I slumped back in my chair, burying my face in my hands. A massive weight settled on my chest. Richard, I don't want this. I don't want the money, and I don't want this war with my son. Richard sighed, his professional armor softening for just a moment. He reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out a handwritten letter, sealed in a pale blue envelope. Caroline knew this would be hard, Arthur, Richard said gently, sliding the envelope toward me. She wrote this for you. Read it. Then we can talk about the logistics of the trust. I opened the envelope with trembling fingers. The handwriting was unmistakably Caroline's, elegant, looping, but slightly shaky from her illness. My dearest Arthur, if you are reading this, the worst has happened, and Liam has just made a spectacular fool of himself. I am so sorry to put this burden on you. You are probably wondering about the $15. Do you remember our first date? It was $1,998. We scraped together exactly $15 in cash. We bought a large pepperoni pizza for $12, and we used the remaining $3 for subway tokens to get back to your cramped apartment. We ate on the floor, laughing until we couldn't breathe. Is greater than. It was the richest I have ever felt. Is greater than I spent the last 20 years trying to give Liam the world. And all I did was rob him of the chance to build his own. I robbed him of the hunger, the drive, and the character that you and I had to forge in the fire. He is drowning in privilege, Arthur. If I give him this fortune, he will be dead in 5 years, from an overdose, or a fast car, or a reckless decision. Is greater than. You are the executor. The trust is ironclad. Do not give him a dime until he understands what $15 is actually worth. Save our boy, Arthur. You are the only one who can. Is greater than love, always, Caroline. A tear slipped down my cheek and splashed onto the ink. She was right. She had finally seen the truth, even if it took her until the very end. Over the next 3 months, Liam made good on his threat. He hired a sleazy, high-profile litigator named Greg. They claimed Caroline wasn't of sound mind. They claimed undue influence on my part. But Richard Harrison was a fortress. In court, Richard produced psychiatric evaluations from 3 independent, board-certified doctors, all dated the exact day Caroline signed the new trust. They all swore she was entirely lucid. Furthermore, the will contained a strict no-contest clause. By suing the estate, Liam legally forfeited his right to any future leniency from the trust. The judge threw Liam's case out with prejudice. The financial fallout for my son was swift and brutal, because the penthouse, the Porsche, and the black cards were all technically owned by Nexus Corp or the estate. Richard legally had to seize them. Liam came home one afternoon to find a foreclosure notice on his door and his car being towed. He tried to crash with his wealthy party friends, but without his unlimited tab at the VIP tables, he suddenly wasn't so fun to have around. One by one, they stopped answering his texts. I watched it all happen from a distance, receiving regular updates from Richard. It was the hardest thing I've ever done as a father, standing by and letting my son hit rock bottom. Every instinct in my body screamed to write him a check, to bail him out, to bring him home. But I remembered the blue envelope. Save our boy, Arthur. So I waited. It was a bleak, freezing November evening when the doorbell rang at my modest suburban home. The rain was coming down in sheets. I opened the door, and my breath caught in my throat. Liam stood on my porch. He had lost weight. The custom Tom Ford suits were gone. replaced by a cheap, soaked hoodie and worn-out jeans. His hair was unkempt, and the arrogant fire in his eyes had been completely extinguished, replaced by a hollow, desperate exhaustion. He didn't yell. He didn't demand his money. He just stood there, shivering in the cold. "Dad," he whispered, his voice shaking, "I'm hungry, and I don't have anywhere to go." I didn't hesitate. I reached out, grabbed his shoulder, and pulled him inside out of the rain. I handed him a warm towel and heated up a bowl of leftover chicken stew. I sat quietly at the kitchen table while he ate like a man who hadn't seen food in days. When he finally pushed the empty bowl away, he looked down at his hands. "I'm sorry," he mumbled, "about the funeral, about the lawyer's office, about everything. You won, Dad. You have it all, and I have nothing. Just tell me what you want me to do." I leaned forward, clasping my hands on the table. It was time to be the father he desperately needed. "I didn't win anything, Liam," I said firmly but gently. "And this isn't a game. But if you want to stay in this house, if you want a roof over your head and food in your stomach, we are going to do things my way." I laid out the terms, making sure my voice offered no room for negotiation. "Employment. You will find a full-time job within 7 days. I don't care if it's flipping burgers or digging ditches. You will work 40 hours a week. Contribution. 30% of every paycheck goes to me for rent and utilities. Respect. There are no maids here. You do your own laundry, you wash your own dishes, and you treat everyone in this neighborhood with respect. No handouts. You will not ask me for advances. You will learn to budget what you earn." Liam looked stunned. A year ago, he would have laughed in my face. Tonight, he just nodded slowly. "Okay, Dad, okay." True to his word, Liam hit the pavement. With no college degree and a resume that consisted entirely of trust fund baby, the corporate world wanted nothing to do with him. On the 6th day, he swallowed his pride and walked into a local, family-owned hardware store run by an old, no-nonsense guy named Bill Henderson. Bill hired him to sweep floors, stock heavy bags of fertilizer, and clean the bathrooms for minimum wage. The first month was agony for Liam. He came home every day covered in dust, his hands blistered and callous. He complained bitterly at first, but I held my ground. When his first paycheck arrived, he stared at it in disbelief. It was less than what he used to spend on a single bottle of champagne. But when he handed me my 30% for rent, I saw something flicker in his eyes. It was a tiny, fragile spark of pride. Months turned into a year. The transformation was slow, painful, but undeniably real. Liam stopped checking his phone for messages from his old friends. Instead, he started having dinner with me. We talked about history, about baseball, about his mother. He started opening up about the crushing pressure he felt growing up in Caroline's shadow, the anxiety of never feeling like he earned his place in the world. He was promoted to a floor manager at the hardware store. Bill told me Liam was the hardest worker he'd ever hired. One evening in late October, exactly a year after he had shown up on my porch in the rain, Liam walked into the kitchen. He had just gotten off a long shift. He walked over to the table and slid a piece of paper toward me. I looked down. It was a crisp, brand new $10 bill and a $5 bill. "What's this?" I asked, looking up at him. Liam smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. It was a smile I hadn't seen since he was a little boy. "It's $15, Dad," he said. "I got a bonus at work today. I figured it's my turn to buy the pizza." My throat tightened. I looked at the money, then at my son, a man who had been broken down to his foundation and had rebuilt himself, brick by agonizing brick. "I'd love a pizza, Liam," I managed to say, blinking back tears. The next morning, I told Liam to put on his only decent suit. I drove us downtown, back to the towering glass building that housed Harrison, Sterling, and Associates. Liam was confused and noticeably anxious as we walked back into that familiar mahogany boardroom. Richard Harrison was waiting for us, looking exactly as he had a year ago. "Sit down, Liam," Richard said, gesturing to the chair. "Dad, what are we doing here?" Liam whispered, tension radiating from him. "I don't want anything from them. I'm good. I'm finally good." "I know you are, son," I said, putting a hand on his shoulder. "That's exactly why we're here." I nodded to Richard. The lawyer pulled a thick, leather-bound portfolio from his desk and opened it. He slid a bank statement across the table to Liam. Liam looked at the paper. He blinked, rubbing his eyes, and looked again. The balance at the bottom of the page read $167,450,000. "What is this?" Liam breathed. "That is the Caroline Miller estate," I said softly. "Over the last year, it has grown through interest and investments. I haven't touched a single cent of it, Liam. I still live on my teacher's pension." Liam looked at me, completely, utterly bewildered. "But Mom left it to you. You inherited it all." "You inherited it all." "No, Liam," Richard interjected, steepling his fingers. "Your mother placed it in an irrevocable blind trust, with your father as the sole executor. The directive of the trust was clear. Arthur had absolute discretion to release the funds to you, but only when he deemed you possessed the character, humility, and financial respect to handle it without destroying yourself." The realization hit Liam like a freight train. He looked at the bank statement, then up at me, his eyes filled with tears. But this time, they weren't tears of anger. They were tears of profound understanding. "She didn't cut you out, Liam," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "She loved you too much to let the money kill you. She gave you a $15 wake-up call, and she trusted me to guide you through it." Liam covered his face with his calloused hands and wept. He wept for his mother. He wept for the wasted years, and he wept for the man he had finally become. I stood up, walked around the table, and pulled my son into a tight embrace. "You earned it, son," I whispered into his shoulder. "Not the money. You earned yourself." We didn't transfer the millions that day. Liam didn't want to. He kept his job at the hardware store for another 6 months, saving up his own money. When he finally did start accessing the trust, he didn't buy a Porsche. He bought out Bill Henderson's hardware store so the old man could retire comfortably, and he started a charitable foundation in Caroline's name, dedicated to helping underprivileged kids go to trade schools. Sometimes, the greatest inheritance a parent can leave a child isn't a fortune. It's the painful, necessary lesson of how to survive without one. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Raising kids in today's world isn't easy, and sometimes tough love is the absolute only way to save the people we care about most. Subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories about family, betrayal, and the hard road to redemption. Drop a comment below. Would you have done the exact same thing if you were in my shoes? Let's discuss.